of investment life cycle, such as finalizing deal structure, finalizing and executing investment documents like share purchase and share subscription agreements, overseeing due diligence process and allied compliances relating to investment, monitoring and helping the investee companies in their regulatory compliances and exit formalities. Now, I kindly request Jonali Thakur ma'am to take over.
Thank you, Harshita, for the introduction, and good morning, all of you. I just wanted to, can I put off my camera because I'll have to come close to the because I guess
Yes,
the water. Yeah, so I'll
yes,
put
ma'am.
off
Yes,
my
ma'am. You
camera.
can.
Okay. In today's session, is this session is planned to talk about what are the various formats of doing business in India. How should one select which is the best entity to, if they want to go for a startup? What are its features, and what are the features of a private limited company, and what are the things that we need to keep in mind if we are thinking of starting up? The session is designed, I have planned in such a way that we will discuss briefly about different formats of businesses. Then we'll discuss about the private limited company in approximately 45 minutes. And after that, we'll have a short Q&A session where if there's something else that is not covered in the session or some clarity is required on any matter, you can let me know. And after that also, if something else is left to be discussed, you can always reach out to me after this session. So I will just share my screen now for everyone to see. Is it visible now? My screen is visible.
Yes, yes, ma'am. It is visible.
Thank you. So starting up is a very relevant topic for all students these days because we have seen most students are now, opting for having their own startup rather than looking for jobs, high-paying jobs. And it's a very good trend that we are seeing these days. However, while working with so many startups in CI, we have in our portfolio more than like 150 startups in our portfolio, and everybody has the same question that they have an idea but they don't know how to do it, how to legally implement it. So, in today's session, let us discuss what are the different ways in which one can start up doing, business in India. If you want to work in India, if you want to start business in India, you can either do it, without registering your business, or you can do it after registering your business. Now, when I say registering business, it means creating a separate legal entity for doing your business. Before we discuss what are the different ways, for example, I've listed down here sole proprietorship, partnership, LLP, OPC, private limited company. Before discussing what all of these means, let us first understand the difference between having a separate legal entity and not having a separate legal entity. When I say that we are doing business without it having a separate entity, it means that we have not registered it under any regulatory and our business is not separate from us. For example, if today I want to start doing the business of, for example, giving legal services, legal advice to people, I can start working. I can have clients of my own. I can start helping people, taking fee, and whatever fee I earn, that is my income, and I can start paying tax on it under my own PAN in my own income tax return. So what is happening here is that I am doing the business. I'm not separate from my business. Tomorrow, if somebody else wants to join me, they can, some other partner can join me and we can together do this business. But we are the business. So tomorrow, if I stop working or if my partner stops working, then the business stops because the business is not separate from us. That is this way of working is called, working without having a separate legal entity for the business. However, if you want to formalize your business, if you want to create a separate entity, what does it mean? It means that you register your business with the relevant regulatory. For example, whether it is ROC or whether it is, SEBI, RBI, whichever regulatory is applicable to you, you get yourself registered there. You create a separate identity for your business, which means that you have declared that, okay, this is the business that I want to do. This is a separate identification number for my business. I have put in X amount of money in the business. I am running this business. I am behind this business. However, the business is separate. And then you have put in some amount of money. That is your only financial contribution towards the business, whatever capital you have put in. Afterwards, it is expected that the separate business that you have created earns its own income, enters into its own contract, though you are making all of that happen, you are behind all of it. However, the business is entering into contracts in its own name. The money is coming in the business's bank account, in the company's bank account or LLP, whichever format you have set it up. And then if there is any profit or if there's any loss, it is of the business. It is not of you. You may withdraw, you may take out money from that company, from that business in the form of salary or in the form of dividend. However, whatever comes in the business or whatever loss is there in the business is of the business, is of that separate entity. Tomorrow, if you exit that business, the business will still remain. And that is one of the benefits of having a separate entity, that people can come in and go out, but that business will remain. So the example that I gave you of, if I want to start doing my business, I can start doing it. But tomorrow, if I want to create a separate entity, what I will do is I will register my business in the format of either a company, OPC, LLP. And what will happen is that OPC has a separate bank account. I have put in some initial money. After that, whatever income is generated from the business that I am helping the OPC do will come in the bank account of the OPC or the private company. And I may withdraw salary, I may withdraw dividend. Tomorrow, if I want to exit it, somebody else can take it over, but that business will go on. So so the benefit of having a separate entity is having a perpetual, life, that the business can live without you. Secondly, there's a limitation of liability. When you are not your business, you are separate from your business, it means that your financial liability towards the business is only equal to the initial capital, or if in case you want to put in further capital in the company, that is your only liability towards that business. After that, if there's any loss, it will have to be paid off from the business or from the money in the business. And if there's insufficient money, then the creditors may not get the entire amount. That is their loss. However, nobody will touch your personal assets if your business is a separate entity. But in case your business is not a separate entity, if you are your business, then your personal assets, you will have to pay off the liability because it is in your name. If tomorrow something goes wrong, if because of your business somebody has suffered any damage, you will have to make it good out of your own resources. So it is always advisable to have a separate entity for your business, and you be behind it. You run that business, but make it a separate entity. So that is the difference between registering a business and not registering a business. Now, if you want to do a business in India, there are different ways in which you can do it. Uh, so sole proprietorship and partnership are the formats of business which are not registered. LLP, OPC, and private limited company are the registered formats of businesses. When I say sole proprietorship, it means that one single person is running the business. Like the example that I gave you, that if I want to start working, I can start doing it anytime I want to do it, and I can start earning, I can pay tax on my income. That is called sole proprietorship. I am the only person doing the business. All the income is mine, all the loss is mine, all the liability, all the risk is mine. That is sole proprietorship. Similarly, when one person joins hand with another, they have the same maybe business idea, and they decide on sharing profits and losses, they start working together. And they do it by way of an agreement. Two people, it can be an oral agreement, it can be a written agreement, but it's always advisable to have a agreement in writing. When two people start working together, from sole proprietorship, it becomes partnership. You can have many number of partners in your partnership. However, uh, so however, when you want to register your partnership, first you are working alone, then maybe somebody joins you, it becomes a partnership. Tomorrow you think of, creating a separate entity for your partnership, which is always advisable to do. Then the law has provided for a different format, which is called LLP. This format allows people to register their partnership, create a separate entity for it. You have to register your partnership agreement with the ROC. You have to show who are the partners. You have to show what is your arrangement of profit sharing, what is your business idea, and then separate books of accounts are maintained for that partnership. The liability of the partners is limited to the initial contribution they make, or if the follow-on contributions that they make. And separate audit is done of the books of accounts, separate filings are done, and whatever partners withdraw from the LLP is their income. If they do not withdraw, it is the income of the LLP. So when you register your partnership, it is called a limited liability partnership, and it gets a separate entity in the eyes of law, identification in the eyes of law. Then the next format of doing business in India is want to go for a company. Now companies can be of three different types. One is OPC, one is private limited company, and one is a public company. For the for the purpose of discussion today, we will not discuss public company because it's a very large format of doing business and it is not relevant for startups. Of course, everybody aspires to become big and raise funds from public, but the compliances and requirements for a public company are stringent, are you know tough than that of a private company. And for our discussion purpose today, we are not discussing public companies. So we will discuss two types of companies, which is OPC and private company. Now, OPC and private company both are private company only. OPC is also a private company and both have the same regulations applicable on them. The only difference is that when you register your company as a normal private limited company, you need at least two people who would be the shareholders of the company, and at least two people who would be the directors of the company. Now, shareholders mean the people who have put in money, and directors mean the people who are running the company. In mostly in private limited companies, the shareholders and directors are the same people because those who have put in the money, they only run the company. However, they can be different people also. If I have put in the company, I am the owner, I am the shareholder. However, I'm not running the day-to-day business. I can appoint somebody else to do that. Then that person becomes the director. So for registering a private limited company, you need two people, two directors, two shareholders. However, when you have just one person, if I'm a sole proprietor, I am doing my business, I have not identified any other partner for me as of now, but I still want to register my business. How, in that case, the government has provided for an option that if you are just one person, there are no two people available for registering a company, then in that case a company can be registered with one person also. A sole proprietor can go to the ROC, can get its business registered, can have a separate bank account, separate identification number for the company, and maintain separate books of accounts and do the business under the format of a company, and follow all the provisions, compliance requirements and everything applicable to a private limited company. Because OPC is a private limited company with the only exemption that it can have just one shareholder. And also this is the limitation. And OPC also has this limitation that you cannot have more than one shareholder. So when a person is doing business alone and the person is sure that I do not want any other partner, I am not looking to raise funds, I will be able to run my business alone. It's just that I want to formalize it and have a separate identity so that tomorrow if I'm not there, I can nominate somebody else, I can give it to somebody else and move out. So if you want to formalize the business and if you do not have any other person in mind, not looking for any kind of a partnership or fundraise, then you can go for an OPC with the only limitation that the format of OPC is such that it is meant only for one person, and therefore you cannot have more than one shareholder. Also, the compliance requirements of OPC are lesser than that of a private company. Not all provisions of a private company are applicable to it. There are some exemptions given to OPC because it's a very small format of doing business. It is as simple as a sole proprietorship being registered. So these are the different, ways in which you can do a business in India. Now, if we look at the features of this, in order to decide, what are your requirements, you have to think about, what do you want? If tomorrow you want to start up, how many people are there who are with you? What is your long-term goal? Do you want to, do you want to keep your business very small? You're not looking, to go public, or you're not looking to raise funds. If you're not looking for any partner, or whether you're looking for a partner, what is it that you are thinking? Based on that, you have to decide which format is best for you. So if we look at the different features of it, sole proprietorship is not a separate legal entity, but one person company is a separate legal entity. Similarly, partnership firm is not a separate legal entity. If the partners stop working, then the business stops and their liability is unlimited. All if there's any loss, or if there's any claim or damage occurred because of the business of the partnership firm, then the partners will have to make good all the losses from their own pockets. LLP is a partnership which is registered, so it has a separate legal entity. A private limited company has a separate entity. Now, how many people you need to start a sole proprietorship? You only need one person, which is yourself. OPC, there's there's a limit of maximum one person. You can only have one person in this format. You cannot have two. So if you are thinking of, today I'm doing my business alone and tomorrow I may look for somebody else also, then this OPC is not the format for you, because you cannot have more than one person. Then partnership firm, you need minimum two people. There's no maximum upper limit. You can have many partners. Similarly, LLP, you need minimum two people. Private limited company, you need minimum two people. Now, capital criteria. So there's no minimum capital criteria anywhere. Earlier, there was a minimum capital criteria of 1 lakh for private limited companies. Now that has been removed. So it means that if you want to start a partnership firm, LLP or private company, whatever, you can start it with as much money as you have in your pocket, even if it's 1,000 rupees or 10,000, whatever you have. Then registration for sole proprietorship is not required. I mean, it is not possible. There's no registration. One person companies, LLP and private limited company, they are registered under ROC. Firstly, they are registered under ROC to set them up. And later on, depending on the business, they can be also registered under different regulators. For example, if you're a company which is in the business of giving investment advice, etc., you will have to be registered with SEBI. If you are in the insurance business, you have to be registered with IRDA. If you are in some financial business other than advising, then you have to be registered with RBI. Then there are so many other regulators where you will have to get your registrations once you have received your certificate of incorporation from the ROC. Now, partnership firm, there's a office of registrar of firms available in every state where you can register your partnership firm. Now, registering a partnership firm doesn't mean that it gives a separate identity. It simply means that somewhere you have just put in your copy of the agreement. There's no separate identity given. However, if you submit your copy of the partnership agreement to a registrar of firms, tomorrow if there's some dispute, the registrar of firms will listen to you and will help you resolve the dispute between partners. If you have not registered it with the registrar of firms, you can still run the partnership firm. However, then, if there's any dispute and if you want some legal help from that office of registrar of firms, you will have to, before that, get your partnership registered there. So this registration doesn't give a separate entity. This is for the purpose of, help in resolving dispute. If you see that there's going to be a dispute in future, it is useful that you register it. Now, how many days are required to complete the incorporation formalities? In sole proprietorship, there's no formality, there's no certificate of incorporation. You can start working from tomorrow. There's no time required there. You can start working the day you wish to start working. In a partnership firm, you require 1 or 2 days to create a partnership agreement. It takes 1 or 2 days, but because there's no registration required, you can start working in a day or two. However, in OPC, LLP, and private company, there are some formalities which are required for incorporation. We will discuss that in the later slides, that what are the formalities of registering a company. So that requires 1 to 15 days. You can anticipate 2 weeks time to get your company registered. Expenses are, because there are some informations required, some documents to be drafted, some online filings to be done in case of OPC, LLP, and private companies. So the expenses you can, envisage around 15 to 20,000 for registering these entities. For partnership firm, the cost would be just to have a partnership agreement and maybe some other costs here and there. So it's lesser, obviously lesser than these registrations. Liabilities, like we discussed in the sole proprietorship and a partnership firm, there's unlimited liability on the people doing the business. They will have to sell off their personal assets to repay any loss that has been incurred. In OPC, LLP, and private company, the liability is limited to the amount that you have put in the company. Later on, nobody will come and ask you for any additional money. So the financial liability in case of the registered entities gets limited. However, the fiduciary liability is always unlimited. Now, by fiduciary liability, it means that the directors of the company, the people who are running the company, they have a fiduciary liability towards the business, which means they have to take care that the business is run properly, the filings are done properly, there's no fraud, and there's no hiding of facts, there's no misguiding, there's no wrong reporting, etc. All of this, it is a responsibility of the directors. If there's any lapse in any statutory compliance, or if there's any wrong reporting, or if there's any fraud taking place, then the directors will be caught. In that case, you cannot say that I'm separate from my business, and if some fraud has been done, the company should be sued and not me. The directors will be sued in the personal capacity only. So the fiduciary liability is always unlimited, but the financial liability is limited in case of registered entities. Compliance requirements in sole proprietorship and partnership firm is low, because there's not much that you have to, because it is you doing the business, so there's not much compliance or reporting that you have to done, because the stakeholders are just you and maybe some of the other people with whom you are doing the business. However, in OPC, LLP, and private limited company, because it is registered with some other regulators, there are periodic filings that are required to be done. Balance sheets are filed, annual returns are filed, and minutes registers. There are a lot of compliances that have to be done. In a private limited company, the number of compliances are higher than that of an LLP and OPC. However, this should not be the criteria for you to judge which entity you select. You should not think that because the compliance requirements of OPC and LLP are lesser than a private limited company, so I would go for a private limited company. That is not how it should be decided, because whether less or high, you are not going to do the compliances yourself. You will have to hire a consultant. They will do it for you, and you just need to understand what is happening. So we will discuss in the later slides what are the compliance requirements. But then this, though it is high in case of a private company, it is manageable, because somebody will always be there to manage the compliance, and it is always advisable that you take help of a professional to manage your compliances and not try to do it yourself, because there are chances that you might miss something. So this will be taken care by somebody else. However, just for your understanding, that in a private limited company, there are a huge number of compliances that you have to do compared to other formats of business. Winding up is easy in case of sole proprietorship and partnership, because there is no registration taken. You can, the day you want to stop working, you can just stop working, pay off all your liabilities, whatever payments are pending, you just pay it off and you close your business. It is as easy as that. However, in case of other registered entities, there are some compliances which are required to be done before you close. Some certificates are required to be taken from auditors. Some form filings are required to be done before you close your business. So then it becomes difficult to close your business. You cannot just run away tomorrow. You want to just shut your shop and run away. That cannot be done in case of a registered entity, and therefore it is more credible. Therefore, people like to enter into business with companies and OPCs and LLPs, because they know that it's not easy for somebody to today make an agreement and tomorrow disappear. So it gives credibility in the eyes of people who are working with you. Tax rate, in case of tax rate, these can be changed every year. So this is, as of now, this is the tax rate which you can decide, which you can look at it. However, it keeps changing. So every time you start a business, it is advisable that you consult your consultant and ask about what are the taxes that will be applicable in different formats of doing business. When you are raising debt fund, when you're taking loan, in that case, the compliances, you don't have to do anything, just take the loan. However, in case of private limited company, there are certain restrictions, from whom you can take loan, from whom you cannot take loan. Similarly, when you're taking investment, not in the format of a loan, but in the format of investment in equity, in that case also, the compliances in case of a private limited company are high, but in case of LLP, OPC, it is low. Now, structure preferred by VC. So if you are, see, most startups, why is this this point kept in this comparison table, is that all startups look for funding. We have met so many startups, and all of them, without an exception, have said that they are thinking of raising funds in future. So if you are thinking of raising funds in future from a VC or angel investors, in that case, you should be beforehand ready for it. So VCs prefer private limited companies. They do not prefer any other format of business. Now, why is that? Because in case of a private limited company, for somebody to be able to put in money in a private company, it is very easy. They just have to put in money and get shares. They become the shareholder of the company. It is that easy. And if they want to exit your company tomorrow, they can just sell off the shares and exit. And that is why it is preferred. But if you have an LLP or if you have an OPC, in case of OPC, investment is not possible at all, because like we had discussed earlier, there can only be one shareholder. So investment is not possible. If you are looking for funding in by way of a equity investment, It is not possible in case of OPC. But if you are an LLP, in that case also VCs will not invest in you, because the structure of LLP is such that it is a partnership structure. Those who contribute in the business, they are the partners. They contribute by way of money, and they contribute by way of some other service, some other professional know-how or whatever. Those who contribute money, they become partners. Their name is entered in the LLP agreement and registered with ROC. Now, VCs, those who have money, or investors, those who have money, they will give money to your company. They will never want to become partner in your company and assume the, responsibilities of a partner. They will not want to be named as your partner. And also, if somebody becomes a partner in your LLP, if they want to exit also, the exit also becomes difficult, because exit from a LLP would require amending the LLP agreement. You will have to exclude that person from the partner. You will have to, give out the, the contribution back to that partner. So nobody wants to enter into a partnership agreement with any business. That is why they don't prefer LLP. They want to come, VCs and investors want to come in as shareholders. They don't want to come in as partners. Therefore, the private limited company becomes the most favored and preferred format of doing business by startups, those who want to raise funds, and they are the most preferred format of investment for VCs also. So tomorrow, if you have an OPC or an LLP, you've started business, in the format of an OPC and LLP, and you want to raise funds, you can always convert the OPC and LLP to partnership firms. It is not that once you've started business in this format, you cannot convert it to the other format. You can always do that, but then the process is more difficult than incorporating a private company in the first place, because everything will have to be changed. The names, the agreements that you have already done, everything will have to be transferred from one type to another type, and that makes it a very lengthy process. So we advise that if you have thought about raising funds, you go for a private limited company only. And even if you have not thought about raising funds, it is better to go for a private limited company, because you have all your options open. You can take debt, you can take investment, you can, you can have more than one shareholder, not investor, but if somebody else from your friends, family, somebody wants to join your business, you can have that. The only problem with private limited company is that its compliances are high. But we always advise startups to go for a private limited company. And if you look around, you will always find startups mostly in the format of a private limited company only. So now, because a private limited company is the most popular format of doing, business by startups in India, we will quickly discuss what are the requirements of a private limited company, how they are incorporated, what are the compliance requirements, how the private companies are managed. Now, if we talk about private companies, OPCs are incorporated in the same manner, just that their compliance requirements are little less. And LLPs are also incorporated. Their management is also done in the similar manner, just that they have partners instead of shareholders, and their functioning would be slightly different. So if somebody in this session is interested in knowing how LLPs work, then we can discuss that offline. But if we discuss here the private limited company for everybody's benefit, you will, I'm sure, be able to understand how other entities work, because they work in the similar formats only, just that their requirements are a little different, like we discussed in the previous slide. So if we want to incorporate a private limited company, like we discussed, we need minimum 2 members, and maximum could be 200 for a private company, and we need minimum 2 directors. Now, if you are thinking of starting a private limited company, you need to get 2 people, 2 members and directors. They could be the same people. But if you are looking to have different members, different directors, it's also okay. Generally, when a startup raises funds, the investors are the shareholders, they are the members. So shareholders and members are the same thing. They are the two terms used for the same person. Shareholders means the member. So when an investor puts in money, he becomes a member or a shareholder, but he may not be involved in the day-to-day running of the company. So then the directors are different from the members. This is the minimum requirement for starting a private limited company. There's no minimum capital requirement. Now, if you want to register a company, if you have thought about an idea, if you have 2 people with you already, what you need to do is you need to first get a DSC and DIN. Now, what does DSC and DIN mean? DIN means a director identification number. It is just like a PAN that income tax department gives to every citizen of every taxpayer, that if you want to pay tax, you have to pay tax against your PAN. PAN is the number that we use to make income tax filings. Similarly, DIN is the number that is used for the ROC records. So if you want to register a company, any person who wants to register a company and become a director in the company needs to have a DIN. So DIN is a one-time number that is given by the MCA, Ministry of Corporate Affairs, and that number is for a lifetime. And if it is facility provided in the MCA portal is that if you enter the DIN, you will be able to find out in which all other companies that person is a director, because DIN is just one number associated with one person, and in every company that person becomes a director, in every company that person registers, the DIN will be reflected. So you can track in which all companies a person is a director with the help of a DIN. DSC means digital signature. All filings to ROC are done online. Therefore, it is important to have a digital signature, which can be used to sign online forms and submit online forms with ROC. So if you have a DIN and a DSC, you can submit the form for incorporation. For incorporation, you need to reserve a name with which you want to start a company. Now, reserve a name means you think of a name for your business. The only rules that are there for name reservation is that your name should be unique. It should not be matching with any other business so that it does not create any confusion. Also, your name should reflect your main business activity, which means that if I'm today in the business of tourism, for example, then I cannot put my name as, for example, Jinali Education Private Limited. I cannot do that because that is misleading. So your name should be unique. It should not be matching with any other existing company or anybody's trademark. And second, it should reflect your main business activity. Once you have thought of a name, you need to go and register a name in the ROC. The ROC will provide that name to you, which is reserved for 21 days. So within 21 days, you will have to, using that name, incorporate a company. For incorporating a company, you will have to make an online filing of a form called SPICE form. That form will contain the MOA and AOA of the company. I will tell you later what is an MOA, AOA, and other details. These are the details which are put in the form. What is your main object with which you are doing the business? Where will be your office? Then you'll have to provide a proof of address of your office. Who are the subscribers? Subscriber means the member, those who are subscribing to the company, the initial subscribers. So those who are putting in the company money in the company, their details. Who are the directors, their details. What is the amount of money that you're putting in the company? With all these details, you will have to file an online form. It's a very simple online form. Anybody can file it. However, because if you have not done it earlier, you should always take the help of a consultant. But it's a very simple form that anybody can file online. And then once the form is filed with these two attachments, the ROC will scrutinize it and will give you a certificate of incorporation. This certificate of incorporation will contain the name of your company and an identification number of your company, which will be used in future everywhere when you do any filing for your company. Once you get the certificate of incorporation, your company is incorporated. Using that, you will have to register, you will have to open a bank account of your company, and then there are certain other registrations required depending on your business that you will have to do, and then you can start working. Now, I said there are two attachments that are required in an ROC filing for incorporation. They are the MOA and AOA. Now, what is an MOA? MOA means Memorandum of Association, and AOA means Articles of Association. These are the two documents that are created. MOA is the document which defines what your company wants to do, and AOA is a document which are the bylaws. Now, for example, even if in your educational institution in which currently all of you are associated with, there would be some bylaws and there would be some document defining the bylaws. Every organization that is set up, they have some set of rules, which they with which they work. So those set of rules are also there for a company, which the people who are incorporating the company can define for themselves. And similarly, what the company is made for also has to be defined beforehand and submitted with ROC for incorporation. Now, MOA contains your main object, any other object that you want to write in. For example, your main object is manufacturing of some so and so product, but incidental and ancillary to that, you will have to do some other things also for your main object. So that you will have to mention what is the liability for every member, which means what is the amount of money that every member has put in. That is there, which is your registered office. What is the authorized capital, means the upper limit of capital that you have set for yourself. This can also be changed later on if you want to change. And what are the subscriber details? Subscriber details means the details of the people who have put in the money. Now, with all of these initial information, you draft it in the format of a document and you submit to ROC. Later on, if you want to change any of these things, it is possible to change, but the filing with ROC will have to be done again. So it's not that once you have submitted the document, there's nothing that you can change about your company. You can always do that with a fresh filing. Now, AOA, like I said, it is a document which contains the bylaws for your internal management. Now, internal management for a company would be like, how board meetings would be called, how share transfers would be done. If somebody wants to be appointed as a director, how that would be done. And any other bylaws that you want to keep for your company, that you can put it in the AOA. And then the subscribers, they sign the MOA also, they sign the AOA also, and they submit with the ROC. Now, the importance of this document AOA is that when there are 2 or 3 people in a private limited company, they draft the AOA as per their requirement. They decide their own bylaws. Of course, there's a format available online which the Companies Act has provided, but you can modify it as per your requirements. But when you go for investment, when new investors come in, they come in with their own set of rules. In that, at that time, they make you change your AOA and make you do a fresh filing with ROC. So AOA and MOA are a very important document of the company. And when you go for incorporation, you have to draft this. But of course, your consultant will help you draft this. You will not have to sit and draft it for yourself. So with these 2 documents and the previous information that we discussed, we file the form and we get a certificate of incorporation and a company is incorporated. And like I said, before we start doing our business in a company, we need certain other registrations also, like PAN, TAN, bank account, shops and establishment, GST, PF, professional tax, all of these. And there can be any other registrations also. If you are in the food business, you require registration with the food authority. And there are so many other, depending on your business. Everything cannot be listed here, but it is important that you sit with your consultant and make them understand what your business is, for what purpose you are incorporating a company, and then they will only help you with the different registrations that you would require before you start doing your business. Nowadays, the PAN, TAN, and GST can be obtained along with certificate of incorporation also in one filing with ROC. For other registrations, you will have to go separately. After you have received your certificate of incorporation, you will have to go separately for all other registrations that are required. Now, once a private limited company is incorporated, you've got all the registrations done and you've started working. Now, there are certain, like we have discussed, that the compliance requirements of a private limited company is high. When we say it's high, these are the mandatory compliances that you have to do if you have set up a private limited company. Now, mandatory means that whether or not any business is going on in your company. For example, you incorporate the company and later, you realize in a month or, in a few months that, the business is not going and, there's nothing happening. Still, if you have created a private limited company, these things you will have to do, whether there's business or not. Until you wind up your company, you will have to do these mandatory compliances. What are these compliances? After incorporating the company, you will have to file a form within 180 days with ROC and stating that you are now commencing your business. So within 6 months of incorporating the company, you will have to declare to the ROC that I have not just incorporated and kept my company as it is, I am working. You will have to provide details of your bank account and any other registrations that you have taken. You will have to appoint one auditor. You will have to have your first board meeting. Auditor is required to be appointed because, books of accounts have to be audited every year and filed with the ROC. There are certain disclosures from the directors that are required every year. And those disclosures are recorded in the company. They're also filed with ROC. Some registers like register of directors, register of share transfers, register of loans, important contracts, registers of members. There are a lot of registers that a company has to maintain. Then there are certain mandatory forms that have to be filed. Financial statements have to be filed. And all of these things, whether or not you're doing business, if there's nothing that you have got to show to ROC, you will have to, just file maybe nil form, but you will have to file it. Now, the important things to note here is that the requirement of board meetings and general meeting. Board meeting is a meeting of the directors and general meeting is the meeting of members. Like I said, the directors and members are usually the same people, but they can be different people also. So you need to have statutorily minimum 4 board meetings in a year. So what people generally do in a private company is that because they want to comply with the requirement of having at least 4 board meetings in a year, they show it on paper. They don't really take interest in the board meetings. But we suggest the startups that, because you need to have 4 board meetings in a year, why not you take advantage of this compliance and actually meet with the directors, sit and discuss whatever is happening in the business at least once in a quarter. So now, all the startups that we have in our portfolio, we advise them to have like proper 4 board meetings in a year where they will sit with the person they are doing business with. Maybe the person is their friend, their family member, whoever is the other person in your company. It is important to sit with them and have a formal meeting and discuss the business updates. Even if you don't do it anyway, you have to call 4 board meeting in a year and show it that 4 board meetings were held. And these information that, when the board meetings were held, who were present in the board meetings, all of those informations go with the, go in the annual return with ROC. Similarly, once in a year, you have to call a meeting of shareholders. And the agenda for the meeting of shareholders is the financial statements. So once in a year, audit has to be done, balance sheet has to be made, somebody will audit it and make the final financial statements. That final financial statements have to be approved by the members of the company. If the members are the same as directors, it is, this holding a separate AGM, doesn't seem very relevant and just seems like a mandatory compliance that you have to do anyway. However, in case your members are different from directors, then it becomes a very important point that you have to once in a year meet with your shareholders, who could be your investors also, who could be anybody who has put in money in your company. You have to meet with them, you have to show your financial statements to them, and then they will approve it, and then the filing with ROC has to be done. Then there are certain event-based compliances which are to be done. We will quickly go through it because we have not much time left. These event-based compliances means you just have to remember that before doing any activity in the company, before you want to raise funds, before you want to allot shares, before you want to appoint or resign a director, anything, you just have to make sure that the necessary board resolutions are passed, the necessary AGM resolutions are passed, filings are done. Once you have a separate entity created in the form of a company, LLP or OPC, whatever, you cannot just do anything because it is separate from you. Proper accounting, proper paperwork has to be done for everything that you think of. Even if you want to open a bank account, if you want to change the auditors, anything that you want to do, please be sure that you have to do some paperwork regarding it. Then the duties of the board we have already discussed, that it is the board of directors and the key person of the company who are responsible for ensuring compliances, ensuring integrity of financial accounting, etc. Means the directors are the people who are behind the company, and it is their responsibility to see that everything is proper. And if something goes wrong, they will be responsible, though financially their liability is limited, but their fiduciary liability is not limited. Day-to-day management of the company. The day-to-day management of the company are done by the directors. The directors call board meetings. They pass their decisions in the board meeting, whatever decision is required. Now, the decision of a board meeting is documented in the format of a board resolution. What is a resolution? Resolution is just a document which says that this is a decision which is made by the board. Now, everything that you do, if you want to enter into a agreement, if you want to open a bank account, if you want to appoint a director, anything that you want to do in the company, the board has to decide, and it has to be documented, and the documentation of a decision is the board resolution, which you have to time and again submit with different authorities. Wherever you go for registration, they will ask for a board resolution. For example, if you go for a GST registration, if you want to go for a PF registration, etc., they will ask you to show a board resolution, and then they will register your company. Before a company makes any decision, they should know whether a board resolution is required or if there are any matter which requires shareholders approval. So all the day-to-day decisions are taken by the board. However, there are certain decisions which are listed in the Companies Act which are important decisions for which a company mandatorily requires members' approval. So if you want members' approval, you will have to call a meeting of members. And then there are rules regarding calling meeting of members of the company or board of the company. The rules are basically saying that you have to give at least 7 days notice before calling a board meeting. You'll have to give proper agenda and documents while you're calling a board meeting. All of those rules are there, which when you go for a board meeting or a general meeting, your consultant will help you draft all of those documents. Another important point for start. So this was all about how a company is made, what are the duties of directors, how the company is managed, what are the compliances. This is all you need to know about before you, when you go for incorporating a company, you have to keep all of these things in mind, that this is all you will have to do. And similar requirements are there for LLP and OPC. Just there are certain exemptions, certain lesser compliances. However, overall management is done in this way only. Now, apart from the day-to-day management, the another important aspect for startups is the intellectual property. And most of our startup founders come to us and ask us, how do they protect their idea? So we always suggest them that not only the decision of selecting the format of business is important, also how you protect your IPR is important. So IPR could be in the form of a trademark, patent, copyright, industrial designs, etc. And there are laws around all of it. If you want to register your trademark, if you want to register your patent or copyright, anything, there are laws with which you can register it in your name and protect it from misusing, from misuse of it by any other party. So the IP is one of, in fact, the most important thing for any startup. If you are working on a different idea, the idea is the most important thing. So while you are considering all of other things about your startup, do not forget to consider how you will protect your IP. You should always register your IP. You should always, have a, before starting your business, you should do a due diligence and make sure that nobody else is using your IP, or whether you are also, not intentionally but unintentionally also, whether you are violating somebody else's IP or not. It is very important, because if you start doing your business and tomorrow somebody comes and throws a claim on you that you have violated their right, their IP, it becomes a very difficult situation. Also, just like it is important to sit and decide how the profit will be distributed, how the business will be done, it is very important to lay down the policies for your IP also. If you are hiring people to work on your idea, if two friends, two brothers are also working together, there should be proper decisions as to how the IP would be used. If something new is created, whose ownership will it be? Will it be the company's ownership, or will it be the founder's ownership? If you are hiring people, you should always enter into non-disclosure agreements with them, and have like very uh, clear policies and provisions for your IP. It is very important. Now for IP, if you want to discuss in detail, we can have another session, because it can go on. There are a lot of things to be discussed in IP, but just wanted to help. We just wanted to let everybody know that this is one of the important things, and a lot of claims are, the number of claims on IP is rising every day. So you have to be careful about your IP also. So my side, about startups, these are the important things that I wanted to let everybody know, which would help them make their decision about starting up. Now, if there are any doubts, if there are any questions, we can discuss that now.
Yes, audience, students, if you have any questions to ask, you can write it or post it in the chat box, or you can unmute and ask questions directly to the speaker.
So, ma'am, it seems like there are no questions as of now. Or should we wait for a minute or two for questions? If not now, if the questions have been
We'll just wait for a minute, ma'am.
yeah.
Hi, ma'am. Like you said, we can consult any consultant or anything for all the mandatory compliances. On what criteria can we go forward for this?
Madam, good afternoon. I am Dr. Setu Madhavan.
Sure.
My
Sorry.
question is on raising funds for the private limited company. Can you just share with us how to raise the funds, especially from the PE investors?
See, raising funds, the legal process for raising funds is that there are a board resolution, there are form filing, then you'll have to issue share certificates. All of those are the legal compliances. The provisions for the legal compliances are laid down in the Act. If you raise funds, your consultant will help you. The legal compliances is not a big thing in case you want to raise funds. There are certain filings and paperwork you have to do. However, the important thing for raising funds is your negotiation with VC and PE funds or VC funds, whatever, or your angel investors. That process is a commercial process. You look for, there are so many VC funds out there, PE funds out there, but you will have to find out the institution that would understand your business, because there are sector focused funds. Some are focused on deep tech, some are focused on clean tech, some are healthcare focused funds. There are different funds. You'll have to find out the best investor for yourself. Then you'll have to sit and negotiate. You'll have to decide on commercials like how much money they will put in and how much stake they will take in return for the money they have put in. What will be their rights? Whether they will become a director in your company or not, whether they want to do the activities or not. All of those things you will have to, commercial things you will have to discuss with them. Whatever you have discussed and agreed will be laid down in the format of an investment agreement. And based on that agreement, they will put in money in your company. And putting in money in the legal formalities, like I said, form filing, board resolutions, share certificates, registers, etc. All of that paperwork your consultant will help you do. But the main thing is not that. The main thing is your discussion with your investors.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. There is one question from Miss Yogita Trivedi. Is it mandatory for OPC to have board of directors meeting and AGM?
So this is a very good question. Because OPC just has one member, there's no requirement of a members meeting. There's just one shareholder, so there cannot be a meeting of shareholders. However, the meeting of board of directors, there's a requirement of having at least 2 meetings in a year. Because in an OPC, there's just one shareholder. However, there's no restriction on the directors. If you have more than one director, there's a requirement of having at least 2 board meetings in a year compared to 4 board meetings for a private limited company. But if there's only one director, then of course you will not have a board meeting. You will just have to, note it down in a half yearly form manner that what were the important decisions taken by the sole director. Harshita also had asked a question.
Yeah, Harshita, you can
Yes,
go ahead
ma'am.
and ask. Yeah, ask your
Yeah,
question.
like based on what criteria can we go forward for consultation? Like, how can we select what kind of consultation we need for the
Okay.
mandatory compliances?
Right. So Harshita, there are a lot of consultants out there. If you look online, you will get a lot of websites, etc., of the people who are ready to help startups with their compliances. But we would suggest that you go for somebody who will be able to understand your business. So you should, before hiring a consultant, should look for what the consultant's experience has been. Has he worked with startups, or has he worked with your kind of, the kind of business you want to do, those kind of startups? Because if a consultant understands your business, then he'll be able to help you. If he doesn't understand your business, he may not be able to give you the best advice. And if you miss any compliance, the cost of non-compliance is very high in the sense that it creates a lot of stress. And also there's a penalty there, financial penalty. So it is best to, you meet the consultant, meet 2 3 people, talk to 2 3 people, and then decide who is the best person who will be able to help you.
Yes, ma'am. Another question, since you're working at the incubation center, what are the major benefits that a startup can get from an incubation center, and how optimally can somebody use it?
See, incubation centers. See, I work in an incubation center where we help. Like I said, we have now more than 100 startups that are there in our portfolio. An incubation center, gives a lot of is very beneficial to startups, because all the startups that are there, we help them with networking. We help them with any kind of help they need. For example, they need help in their HR matters, they need help in marketing matters, they need help in validating their business, idea, or they need help on legal matters. We go and help them. Also, the incubators, if you are associated with any incubator, you will be able to meet different startups who are just like you and network with them. So you will be able to hear from different startups. You'll be able to learn from their experience also. So if you are very new, if you have a lot of confusion, if you don't know what to do, you may always approach an incubator. And also it is important to, before associating with any incubator, it's important to understand what is it that they are expecting from you. Different incubators also have different expectations. Sometimes some incubators take mentoring equity. Sometimes they take some fee in return of the services they give you. So you understand how they incubate, what is it that they will be able to provide you. All in all, getting associated with an incubator is always beneficial for a startup. There's no doubt about it. But it is important to understand what is it that you will receive from them, what is it that they are expecting from you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Students, any more questions? Okay, if not, shall we close it? Madam, what do you say? Shall we wait or?
Uh, we can close the session now, and if later on also somebody has any query, they can write to me. Okay, there's one question. How can I get a VC to pay attention to me? Now, there's no right and wrong answer to this question, but you can reach out. See, Jen, if you have a very strong idea, you can always reach out to a VC directly. Get in touch with any officer from the institution and show them your idea. If your idea is interesting, everybody will pay attention. But if somehow they are missing, they're not able to pay attention, then there's no right answer to it. You'll have to keep trying. uh, you'll have to, then maybe if you have to take feedback. If somebody has not responded to your email, if somebody has not responded to your PPT, maybe just drop any an email and ask them for a feedback as to how you can improve. What is it that they were looking for and was missing in your presentation that they did not pay attention to it. There are various programs also run by different VCs, which are accelerator programs or scouting programs. They open applications. You'll have to submit the application, then they select the best startups. There are different online programs that are run. You can participate in those programs also. You can directly approach also. And if still you're not getting any response, you should definitely ask for a feedback. That why is it that you're not getting a response, and then improve on it.
Thank you, ma'am. On behalf of Department of Management Studies and Mathematics, I extend a warm thanks to Janali Thakur for spending time, and it was very informative session for our students as well as the faculties who are thinking to start up a new business, right? So I'll hand over to give or propose vote of thanks to Ms. Arshita.
Thank you, ma'am, for your time and for sharing your knowledge with us. It was great learning about different types of businesses and moreover about the private limited companies for startups. So learning about all this, it was very interesting. It was a wonderful and highly informative session, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay.
ma'am. Thanks once
Thank
again.
you all of you. Thank
And
you.
thank you all the audience for participating in the event. Thank you, Arshita, Yogita, and Banu Prakash.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hello? Anybody there?